I think there'll be so much to do to, clean up the rot and turn the country around, that I don't know if 5 years is actually long enough. And it could easily be that voters who do decide, let's give the opposition parties a chance, they get to 2029 and they decide, well, they haven't done much. Let's just vote let's vote the ANC back in.
Buckle up for the coalition roller coaster, which continues on its merry way. The latest scene of activity in South Africa's local government is the city of Ekurhuleni, where the DA-led coalition under Mayor Tania Campbell was voted out and then voted back in again. Joining me to discuss is Marius Roodt. He is with the Institute of Race Relations and he lives in the city of Ekurhuleni. So Marius, what's happening there in your neighborhood?
Yeah, so as you say, you describe it as a roller coaster. I think that's probably correct. So a couple of weeks ago, there was a motion of no confidence in the mayor, Tania Campbell, and she was removed from her post. And there were then negotiations between the ANC and the EFF to put forward a mayoral candidate. About a week or so ago, they were going to vote for an ANC candidate, and then that fell through. And then apparently there have been negotiations since where there was going to be support from the ANC for an EFF candidate, but then it seems that the EFF demands were simply unconscionable for the ANC in Ekurhuleni, and that fell through. So what ended up happening was that the ANC put forward a candidate for when there was a new mayoral election, and the DA put forward Tania Campbell again, and the EFF decided to vote for the DA-led coalition, which saw Tania Campbell become mayor again. All this seems to be part of a broader move against the DA-led coalitions in the various metros in Gauteng. We saw what happened recently in Johannesburg, where Mpho Phalatse was voted out, and then she was reappointed through a court order. And apparently there's been moves to do the same in Tshwane. I think it'll be a little bit more difficult there. The coalition in Tshwane is a bit more stable. Opposition parties together have easily over 50% of the seats in Tshwane Council, where in Johannesburg and Ekurhuleni it's a bit more unstable. For example, in Ekurhuleni, the ANC and the EFF together have more than 50% of the seats in Ekurhuleni, which is not the case in Joburg or Tshwane.
Right, so a lot really seems to hinge on the EFF, and there's been a lot of speculation about to what extent is the EFF interested in working with the ANC. And obviously, both parties come from the broader Charterist tradition. Some people call the EFF the ANC Youth League in exile. And in many respects, as our colleague Nicholas Lorimer has pointed out, if the ANC and the EFF were to get together at the national level, that might be a sort of a coalition of chaos or a coalition of evil, given that the EFF has a pretty radical policy program that it wants to implement. But now we see the ANC being a bit coy in terms of working with them in Ekurhuleni. What do you think is the nature of the relationship between these two parties?
Well, so there have been a couple of reports that have come out talking about what happened in these negotiations, and some seem to indicate that the EFF was they're going to be pretty open to working with the ANC. The EFF would get the mayoralty in Ekurhuleni, and then the ANC would get most of the mayoral committee seats. And then some other reports that I've read have said completely the opposite, where the EFF wanted the mayoralty and all the mayoral committee seats in Ekurhuleni, and then the various the council committees would have gone to the chairs of those committees would have gone to smaller parties, so organizations such as the PAC, the ATM, the Independent Ratepayers Association of South Africa. So it depends which report you believe, but I wouldn't be surprised if the EFF did demand all the mayoral committee seats. And it seems to be, it's a kind of a strange strategy. The EFF talks about how they want to govern, but when they have been in a position to at least be involved in governing coalitions, they've kind of pushed back. We've seen them involved in a number of coalitions across the country where they're more in a kind of a confidence and supply agreement, where they don't have any mayoral committee seats, they don't chair any committees on the council or whatever the case is, and they vote on a case-by-case basis for mayors or budgets or whatever the case is. They don't seem to be really putting themselves on the line and actually having to govern. So it seems that this was maybe a case of that, but it's quite a strange demand if it is true that the EFF wanted mayoralty and all the mayoral committee seats. When it comes down to it, 86% of people in Ekurhuleni didn't vote for the EFF. So it's quite a strange demand to say that they want to have complete control of the metro. which is, I think, the third or fourth biggest metro in the country. And obviously with the very large budgets and so on. I mean, it's one thing for the EFF to be involved in a governing coalition, but for it to want to govern a whole metro when it doesn't have 50% of the votes in, or didn't have 50% of the seats in that particular council, it's it's quite a strange way of wanting to govern, and actually it shows that there's quite a level of contempt for democracy, I think, within the EFF. But I don't think that surprises anybody who listens to the show regularly.
And yeah, I mean, I suppose you would also have to look at it from the ANC's perspective, and there might be fears there that any concessions to the EFF could precipitate a kind of reverse takeover of the ANC by the EFF. And that also disrupts the delicate balance of power between all these competing patronage networks within the ANC, which is essentially this kind of patchwork of all these different kind of special interests.
Well, it seems what happened in Ekurhuleni was that the ANC in Ekurhuleni, led by Mzwandile Masina, the former mayor of Ekurhuleni, he pushed back against this EFF proposal, while Panyaza Lesufi, who's the chair of the ANC in Gauteng, was pro it. And we've already seen now some reactions in the ANC in Gauteng. There's apparently going to be disciplinary steps taken against Mzwandile Masina. And I'm not Mzwandile Masina's biggest fan, but I think he did exactly the right thing here. If he did push back against the EFF having all the mayoral committee seats, it's simply not how, this kind of thing should work, or how democracy works. And I think it's also spot on. I think there's probably a number of people in the ANC who, the EFF is generally, you would think the ANC's kind of natural coalition partner. But I do think there is probably a worry that if the EFF and the ANC do get a bit too close, there could be some kind of reverse takeover, as you point out. And I think Julius Malema himself also knows that the only way he's going to get to real national power in South Africa is through piggybacking on the ANC. I think the EFF is close to its ceiling of support in South Africa. It got 12% in the last election. Most polls have it at around about 14, 15%. And if you look at people who actually say they're going to vote in these polls, then its support drops down to about 12%. So the EFF is never going to be a kind of a mass party in South Africa. It's always going to be, as I say, kind of a 10% party. So Julius Malema knows that the only way to actually get to national power is through using the ANC and doing either taking over from the inside, or being a kind of the smaller coalition partner, but actually having outsized influence. So I think a lot of people in the ANC are aware of this, and I think that is a concern for some people in the party.
And what about the DA and some of the other coalition partners in these Gauteng metros? I was speaking to a DA insider in Ekurhuleni earlier today. He was saying they've got another 6 months at least, which is the window with which you're not allowed to have another motion of no confidence. But I mean, 6 months isn't a very long time. Can these parties really achieve anything in terms of services, given the kind of delicate state of many of these coalitions?
Yeah, I think that's exactly it. These things are very difficult to manage. I mean, the DA is, as I said, it's the senior partner in this coalition, but it's only got about 27 or 28% of the vote in Ekurhuleni. So it really relies on other parties, including the EFF, to govern there. I was also speaking to somebody who's been involved in the governance of Ekurhuleni as a DA person. Also, there's lots of ANC cadres who are being in important positions in Ekurhuleni, and it's quite difficult to get people out of positions they've been put in. There's also lots of kind of corruption and maladministration in Ekurhuleni, lots of the legacy of the ANC governance from before, and it's also quite hard to clear this kind of thing out, and it's not something you can do overnight. It's probably not even a 6 month or a year project. It's a 2 or 3 year project. And I think that's something that's probably a worry for the kind of wild dogs, or whatever you want to call them, in South Africa in general. If they do manage to, say, by 2024, let's say that an opposition coalition does take over the country, I think there'll be so much to do to, clean out the rot and turn the country around, that I don't know if 5 years is actually long enough. And it could easily be that voters who do decide, let's give the opposition parties a chance, might they get to 2029 and they decide, well, they haven't done much, let's vote the ANC back in. And this is, I mean, I've mentioned on the show before, it happened in India, where Congress was voted out, and then opposition coalition was lots of infighting, didn't manage to change things much. Congress was voted back in, and we've seen it in around the world. That's just happened in Israel as well, where an opposition coalition managed to get rid of Benjamin Netanyahu. That coalition, lots of infighting, had to have another election, and Benjamin Netanyahu is probably going to be the Prime Minister of Israel again. So it's something that's happened around the world, and I think it's definitely something that the kind of wild dogs in South Africa need to be aware of.
Marius Roodt, thank you very much. Let's hand over to you, our audience. Do you think that opposition-run coalitions are a viable alternative to the ANC? Leave your thoughts down in the comments section. Also, if you enjoyed this analysis, you might want to become a client of the CRA. We have a number of reports and other services exclusively for our clients. There's a link in the description below where you can find out more. My name is David Ansara. This is the CRA. Until next time, take care.